thank you all for coming. Hopefully you can hear me. Hopefully the mic's picking me up. So we're going to kick off very shortly. We're just going to make a couple of announcements about the event tonight. So it's great to see so many faces. We had a lot of interest in this event, which I think is really reflective of the content and the presenters that we've got for you today. I just want to introduce myself. So my name's Tom Waddington. I have been planning this event alongside our partner host, HyperFinity, from Asda side of things. But in my day job, I'm actually responsible for geospatial and market intelligence. So effectively, we look at location-based data, competition, demographics, and effectively we're helping the business make decisions about where should we be opening our stores, what are our customers doing when they interact with us, how are they interacting with the competition, and influencing decisions like who are the partners that we should be working with. And then once we identify that, where should we be putting those partners in our stores? And you're going to hear some content from two guys from Barclays who we work with. They're actually one of my key data providers, and they'll go into that a little bit more in their detail, talk about how we use their expertise and data to help the business make decisions and recommendations that are data-led. When we started planning this event, we had two aims in mind. The first was really to showcase data, insight, analytics at Asda, and we really wanted to shout about that with peers and industry peers from Leeds and across the UK. Asda is absolutely committed to this, and we work with lots of partners who support on that. We've got Simon Jury here, who's going to talk a little bit later. He's our new VP of the data and insight function, and Asda really understands that there's a lot of power in data. We want to use that to inform decisions. So that's kind of one of the core aims of what we want from this event. The second aim, let's get done, is kind of a bit of a selfish one from Asda's perspective. Hopefully through generating that interest, through conversation, through the topics that we're going to talk about tonight, we want to get you to engage and be excited about the roles and the career opportunities and the data and the sort of work that we're doing at Asda. And off the back of that, you may consider coming and working for Asda. I'm hoping that we've got Jamie and Ed in the room. So those guys are over there on that corner. So if you want to speak to them about careers at Asda, they're going to be here through the event. So if you've got any questions, please direct it to them and they can talk about those opportunities at Asda. The final bit from me before I hand over to Pete, it takes a lot of time and effort to plan these events. So I really want to thank everyone that's been involved, particularly the presenters. It's a big commitment. I know we've got guys that have come up from London, so thank you to them. I also want to thank HyperFinity as well. They've done a lot getting this off the ground. I wouldn't have been able to do it on my own, so thanks to those guys. And in particular, I want to call out Jag, who's been my counterpart over on their side, so thanks to him for their planning. So that is it from me. I've decided I don't want a career in event planning after trying to plan this, so I'm going to hand over to Pete, and he's going to talk about HyperFinity in a little bit more detail.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Thank you for giving up your Thursday evening to come and hear about how to move from data to decisions to succeed in retail. We had a really good response to the event, actually, really pleasing. Loads and loads of people signed up via Eventbrite and via LinkedIn. The nature of in-person events is that you do get a little bit of a drop-off on the actual event, but I think it really shows that we've got a thriving data community in and around Leeds. And that community is really aided when we have this kind of event on, where you get world-leading brands such as Asda and Barclays, working with leading educators such as the University of Leeds, and then what we like to think of as a innovative scaling technology and consulting business in HyperFinity. When we all work together to bring this kind of content to an audience, we think there's a real appetite for it. So I think you'll enjoy some of the content that we've got this evening. So if you haven't come across HyperFinity before, I'll give you a little intro. I'm Peter Denby. I'm the co-founder and chief commercial officer of HyperFinity. And we help retailers make some of their most important decisions. So we help them work out what product range they should sell, how they should price those products, how they market them to customers in personalized ways, and how they make sure that products are on the shelf when and where customers want to buy them. And I think retail is a really interesting industry for us to work in. It's really relevant and tangible because we all go shopping. We all shop in stores and online. Therefore, it's something that's we can all really get enthused about. And it passes the MUM test, I think. And if you wonder what the MUM test is, but has anyone ever been in a position where the mum said to you, so what do you do for a living? My mum used to say that to me, and I used to say I work in data and analytics, thinking I was dead clever. And she just had a blank look on her face, like, what the hell is data and analytics? But now I can explain to her that I help people like Asda to offer great products and discounts via their rewards app, or I help the likes of the Card Factory to set really appealing prices for the birthday card that she's going to buy at the weekend. Or we help the likes of Hotel Chocolat to offer their Velvetizer hot chocolate making machine to the right kind of customers. So it's a lot more kind of tangible than some of the fields that we can work in. So it's really, really interesting for us. And we've got some great speakers who are going to deliver some content to you this evening. So you've heard from Tom from Asda. We're also going to hear from Simon and a couple of his colleagues, Raf and Andy. They're going to speak about Asda's data capability and their kind of vision for the future. You'll hear from my colleagues, Adam and Jessie. They'll talk about how to succeed with decision intelligence. We have Rohan and Charlie from Barclays. They're going to talk about changing consumer spending patterns, what they mean for retail. And last but not least, you'll hear from Vicky from Leeds Institute of Data Analytics, part of the University of Leeds. And Vicky's going to talk about some of the great work that they're doing with retailers. We're going to have a break partway through so you can get pizza, some drinks, and the opportunity to chat to your fellow attendees and some of the presenters. And we'll try to leave space at the end of each presentation to ask a couple of questions as well. So without further ado, I will hand over to Simon. Simon Jory from Asda.
Thank you, Peter, and thank you, Tom. And look, I echo the thanks for attending. I've been working in data analytics for a long time, and I think it is just a hugely exciting field to be in and a fascinating time to be working in this area. Look, I'm not going to talk for too long, but I wanted to give it a bit of a setup to this session in terms of some of the key decisions that retailers make when they're thinking about how to get value from data and from analytics programs. And to give you a bit of context, I'll explain a bit about my background. So I started in this field in 1999, which means a couple of weeks ago, I was introduced as a data science veteran, which I think was meant as a compliment, but I didn't take it as such. I worked for 17 years with a business called dunnhumby, which you may have heard of. It's Tesco's data analytics business, really. I kind of worked my way up from being a hands-on coder. I coded in Fortran. Anybody? Yes, thank you. And then SAS, and then Perl and Python, etc. And then I did various kind of management roles, ending up working as the general manager in Latin America. So I spent 14 years overseas, 11 years in China, 3 years in Sao Paulo. But the key thread running through my career has always been either growing or setting up analytical data engineering teams within mainly grocery retail. I've done a little bit outside retail, but it's mainly been grocery retail. And it's been fascinating to see the evolution of the industry over that time. I remember when building a logistic regression model was seen as witchcraft. Now you can download it and do it in 30 seconds. But some of the key themes remain true now as they were 20 years ago. And a lot of the retailers that I've worked with in the UK and abroad, they're faced with commonly two different challenges. Like either they're sitting on a load of data and they read the industry press and they see, oh, there's value in data, but we haven't started to release it yet. We don't know where to start. Or quite commonly, they have started and they've got a team and they've invested, but they've been disappointed by the returns they've got. They're not getting back what they thought the investment would promise them. And the conversations normally go along kind of two streams, right? Well, either what do I need to change or what do I need to start? And there's a decision point there. Like, how do I get value from the data? And the obvious one is, right, well, I'm going to use it to better inform internal decisions. And we'll hear a lot more about that kind of side of data from Andy and from the rest of the team later on. But it's really like, I can optimize my price points through data. I can optimize the products that people see in the store through data, the promotions that I run the ranges that I see, how that changes by location, by time of year, even by time of day in some cases. The marketing that I send to my customers, data can really drive all of that. And the key to getting value there is really locating the people who are generating the data with the people who are running the business. So a big mistake that a lot of definitely retailers, and I would kind of extrapolate other industries, make is investing in a data team, like hiring in super clever people, locking them in a room, throwing some data at them, and expecting that they're going to think mighty thoughts, write clever code. 6 months later, they're going to come out with the answer. And it doesn't work that way. To be a business that is making decisions based on data, the people who are analyzing that data have to be sitting within the business. And I kind of think of a data community in the same way as an HR function or a finance function. You know, these are teams that have a strong center, but they really work by partnering with the business units, partnering very closely with the business units. So that's route one. Route one is, how do I use the data to improve core processes within the business? Route two is around commercialization. So any retailer of a decent scale, 5% plus market share, they're sitting on an asset that's got value in the marketplace. And Asda are starting to do this now. So we are wrapping up our data, we're anonymizing it, we're adding insights, and we're selling those into the FMCG community. So the P&Gs, the Coca-Colas, the Unilevers, they're desperate to understand in detail what's going on in their categories, who are their customers, how are their customers different from Unilever's, how does that change when they launch a new product, how does it change when there's a TV campaign? And they can answer that through research, but that's expensive and you're limited by the sample size, the panel size, whereas the 20 million people that shop in Asda every year, you know, it's very representative. You can go very deep in terms of demographics, geolocation, and it's real. It's not declared behavior, it's real behavior. And suppliers are desperate, FMCG companies are desperate to get their hands on that kind of insight. The other way to monetize is through media. And I know that the HyperFinity team have done a great job at supporting Asda with our media growth. But in the world of highly targeted digital advertising, the ability to use actual behavioral data to isolate audiences, super powerful. And then the ability to use the data to measure the impact, super powerful. Like without the data, impact is measured based on how many people saw an ad, how many people walked past a poster. You've got the data, you can see, did they actually go on and buy it, which is obviously what it's intended for in the first place. Now, when it gets really exciting, and this is the path that Asda is on, is where those two pillars of value, the internal growth and then monetization, have a feedback effect on each other. And that works by, if you imagine you're generating a good revenue stream from commercialization, you can take some of that revenue stream, you can feed it into the core business, you get better products, better prices, better promotions, better marketing. Your core business grows, you get more customers, they're spending more, their baskets are bigger. Suddenly the value of the data is bigger. The revenue stream over here gets bigger, money gets pumped in here, and you get this lovely, lovely flywheel effect. Retailers that are doing that well, my experience, Amazon, about 6% of Amazon's global retailer, or global sales rather, is through monetization and through media. And Alibaba in China, who have got the most amazing closed loop ecosystem you could ever want to see. In the UK, my background is dunnhumby, and I have to declare it's Tesco. Tesco do that very well. But Asda are on the way, and I would say in 2 to 3 years' time, we will have the ability and the capability to go past what we're seeing in Tesco and to a lesser extent Sainsbury's today. So look, that's a bit of my perspective and my background. Again, it's wonderful to be here. Thank you so much for coming and supporting these events. And I'm handing over to Andy, I think.
Yeah. Evening, everybody. So great to see so many people here. And yeah, again, I'd just like to echo the thanks to sort of Peter, Tom, HyperFinity, and the team kind of pulling this together. So Tom kind of works for me in analytics and decision services. He kind of was being a bit modest earlier talking about his ability to organise events. It's actually been quite interesting seeing him over the last hour when he was told he had to print out was, I think, 200 name badges just before people arrived by security, but it looks like, I think you managed to navigate that, so well done, and maybe you do have a future career in that as well. So just a bit of background on me before I get into it. So like I said, I'm the Senior Director for Analysis and Decisions here at Asda. I report to Simon. I've been at Asda for about 7 years, and actually my background is slightly different from some of the data professionals in the wider function. So most of my background previous to Asda was actually working in strategy teams, business transformation teams, and commercial finance as well. And I think a lot of kind of my observations in the various different industries that I've worked in, so I'm not kind of a retail lifer. I work for Universal Studios, EasyJet, Argos, HJ Heinz, so I've covered quite a lot of different industries. But what I kind of really notice across the board is, like, when you're working on the transformation work stream, effectively really what you're trying to look for is how do you make your organization make more sophisticated, smarter decisions to drive that value that Simon kind of referenced earlier. And really where we kind of get to is you need to be able to produce really good insight, or you need to be able to produce or build a lot more sophisticated decisioning products to run your organization, whether that's, in retail, things like what range should you drive, what product should you put on promotion. So my background is kind of more in transformation, but kind of through that lens, what I was able to see is like the power of data analysis to kind of be able to build those new products that I just described. Just kind of one use case that I think was really, really helpful for me in kind of like forming my passion really for decision making and really trying to influence it through data was my time at EasyJet. So it was about 12 years ago, kind of make me feel quite old when I was trying to work that out a bit earlier today. But essentially kind of a new budget airline. Clearly everybody knows who EasyJet are. Quite a lot of new systems, lots of data, and actually 12 years ago were quite sophisticated in terms of the technology they had. So, it kind of gave people the ability, a bit of a playground to look at how you can do things differently. And previously what EasyJet had is about 300 or 400 route managers. So all of the different prices for every single flight that you see on the website was determined by a route manager who essentially didn't really have a decisioning system to help make those decisions themselves. Massive industry of analytics, lots of people looking at the prices that customers paid on all those different flights and essentially producing that analytics to give feedback to the route managers to say, we sold out this flight quite early, maybe there's an opportunity to set a high price next time, and then so the process continues. But during my time there, that kind of analytics industry was replaced by a much more sophisticated decisioning tool. So we implemented something called a revenue management system, which effectively built in all of the data science and machine learning capabilities, perhaps not sophisticated as today, but 10 or 12 years ago was sophisticated at the time. And essentially that analytics industry started to disappear, and a lot of the decisions were driven by data science, and effectively the route managers could just apply a few adjustments over the top of it. So that's kind of, I kind of lived through that experience, and what I was able to see is kind of putting the decisioning tools and replacing some of the the industry-wide analytics really kind of starts to drive some value. So my role at Asda, so like I said, look after analysis and decisions. So kind of really simple terms, the analytical side of that equation, my team will look at how are our stores performing, what's happening in our stores. So, availability, what's happening in waste, what's happening, how well are we complying with particular standards in stores. We will also analyse products and category performance, so sales, margin, funding, what's happening with our suppliers as well. And then obviously we've got a really big colleague base, 140,000 colleagues work across Asda in various different guises across retail, depot and home office. So again, we look at what's happening with our colleague base from a productivity perspective. We also work really closely, not in my team, but with a larger customer data and analytics team that, again, will look at our customer base using the information that we've got from the Asda Rewards app, which hopefully a lot of you have kind of seen and aware of. But more recently, and kind of what I'm going to talk a bit more about today is how do we organise ourselves really about the decisioning side of my role. So beyond the analytics, how do we help Asda understand what new stores we should be opening, where we should open them, why, how much space should be allocated to different categories and to different products, on what basis and why, how much stock should we reorder, and again, what, on what foundation should we do that. So, the second part of my role, decisioning bit, is something that we've been focusing a lot more on in the last 2 or 3 years, and it's something, again, in the next 2 or 3 years we'll be kind of upskilling even further on as well. So just kind of moving on to a couple of different points. Again, from my perspective, I think in retail, maybe up until about 3 to 5 years ago, the things on the left-hand side of this on the screen were certainly seen as core challenges for data teams. Like how do we deal with these issues to get out like just standard reports and pieces of analysis and things like that. So again, in Asda, Lots of different systems historically, different people systems, different finance systems, all the different till systems that we've got. And then kind of within that, we've got billions of transactions that are being made across the organisation with lots of different customers as well. The best part of 100,000 products, unique products that we kind of sell throughout the year, including they go through dozens of different depots and distribution centres that we've got across the UK. So, lots of kind of different data sat in different systems. And also, again, in retail, you've got different parts of the organisation that data teams need to figure out how we work with and how we partner. Simon kind of referenced it a bit earlier today. Commercial teams deciding what products we should sell, what should go on promotional space, what price we should sell them at. You've got property teams deciding what new stores we should open. You've got merchandise teams deciding what products should go in what stores. You've got supply teams deciding how much products we should order. And then you've got distribution teams trying to figure out effectively how you get those products from the supplier into the store, into the hands of the customers. So you've kind of got these challenges of who do you work with and how should you work with them and how do you engage them. Lots of metrics, I'll kind of jump to that. So again, in a big retailer like this, we've got, you can pick hundreds of different metrics about like what's doing well and what's not doing well. And essentially in that kind of landscape of functions that we work with, you've got commercial teams that historically try to drive a KPI that is significant to them, like sales, but they might not necessarily have all the information of the downstream impact that might have on the supply chain or the distribution team. So again, you've got lots of different metrics, and for data teams, it's really about like how can you kind of pull all of that together and help the business think about things in a lot more end-to-end way to kind of drive that value. And again, what I would say is because you've got these different functions, the retail industry has really come from a background of having smaller pockets of data teams kind of partnering with those different functions that I just described. And sometimes that's good because you get subject matter expert knowledge. But again, what you don't get is a big community of experts that are all working together and trying to think about how they do the best things for the organisation. And I think, over the last 3 years in particular, and it will continue to evolve in Asda, the stuff on the kind of right-hand side are the things that have perhaps turned those challenges into more opportunities for data colleagues, like kind of people that work for Asda. So from a technology perspective, all of those different systems that I just described, Asda is about 2/3 of the way through its future program, which is essentially moving away from the Walmart systems and moving on to our own Asda bespoke systems that are designed for us that will bring all of the new technology that is available for analytical and data science type functions. So that is effectively will be replacing all of the different tills across all of our different stores, all of our finance systems, people systems, and then all of the tools and technology that teams like mine can effectively use to really think about things in a different way. And then beyond that, again, in the last 3 years, we've seen a real push towards that centralisation piece. And the trick here is, and I've kind of said it already, we bring colleagues together to work in a much more kind of super-powered function that sits in the centre of the organisation. But we must not lose our connection to the organisation and those teams that are making decisions. So whilst we may move some colleagues out of those functions and move them into the centre, it's absolutely imperative that we still stay part of the fabric of those teams. And again, that's something we've been very focused on in the last couple of years in terms of the capability side. Analysis and insight is something that we've been developing and building towards, and kind of data science capability as well. And as Simon referenced, that is something that we will continue to accelerate in the next couple of years. So I think, again, with all of this, it's like, that's great. We've got loads of data. It's all kind of coming together. We've got lots of capability. But essentially, how do we ensure that we're working on the right things? That's really the question when we're coming back to how do we influence decision making. So something here is probably quite a morbid analogy. I'm sure there's a better one, but I've kind of got this thing around treating the symptoms versus curing the disease. And this is where I think, where do you spend your time as a big data function to get the most value for the organisation? And kind of my perspective over the last 10 or 15 years, I've seen this happen quite regularly, where we get way too bogged down in analytics and not really thinking about how the business works and how it makes decisions. And a reasonable example of this is, working with a big retailer as I've got thousands of these types of examples. They come up every day. There's loads of interesting questions we can go in, have a look at. How did our promotional space perform in Q1, and what should we do better next time? Might be a common example of the type of question that you might go away and analyse. You can obviously go and kind of build all your dashboards and do some analytics and stuff like that. Move into the insight of, okay, based on my analytics, what are my findings? What should we do better next time? And just pure examples. So this isn't really what happened, but you may look at it and say, what we've realised is our toiletries business didn't perform very well when we put it into that promotional space. The sales and margin effectively underperformed the amount of space that we gave it. So, the action for next time when we decide what should go on promotion is maybe we look at reducing our toiletries proposition. That would seem quite sensible. Own brands sold out early, but we had very strong customer feedback. They love our own brand products. So again, you might come to the conclusion that next time we should be looking at how we should move own brand maybe to the front of the store, so customers see it when they kind of come into the foyer and start thinking about with the supply teams how we get high volumes in for next time. And then perhaps a regional lens on it would be the Southwest stores did perform very well on high price points. So, have we really got our proposition right in that part of the organisation? So all this stuff sounds really sensible, and there's definitely a really big place for this. But essentially, you can get lost in these questions in a big retailer like Asda. And for me, the really big missing piece of kind of this equation is, particularly in the analysis and insight world, what you should really be looking is what is the actual process that is being used by the teams that determine what we should put on promotion. Like, how does that process work? What's the technology that's being used? What metrics are we used and designed to actually drive the overall decisions for what ends up in a promotion? And the insight off the back of that will probably be, we need to have a look at the process and do something fundamentally differently to try and optimize it in the right way for our customers and for us and for our shareholders. And I guess kind of my findings on this is that in large organizations, whether it's in retail or any of the other companies that I've worked in, there's usually about 10 to 20 really big decision-making processes that happen in the company, that if you can find your time as a data team to really focus on how those processes work, learn about them, and help the business improve them and enhance them and optimize them in the end, that's really where the value is. So there's definitely a place for analytics, but we're talking about decisioning today, really kind of focusing on how the business actually works, how we make decisions, and how we can make that better is kind of something that as a group, as a kind of data group, we are committed to doing, particularly the next couple of years. So I'll kind of come on to this, kind of how it works in Asda and retail in a minute, but there's 5 real principles that we use to approach this in the right way across our data analysis teams. So number 1, I think it's absolutely imperative that our teams understand what the business's strategy is, and off the back of that, what are the key measures of success that at an exec level, Asda think are the things that we would say we're doing a really good job. And in most organizations and in retail, in an Asda, they usually revolve around delighting our customers and delivering value for shareholders. And when you dig a couple of layers down into the kind of metrics that you'd be looking at to say, how do I measure, are we doing a good job on that? Something like customer value, how many new customers are we attracting into the business? What percentage of customers are we retaining? And those customers that we're retaining, are they buying bigger baskets? Are they coming into our stores thinking you've got a great proposition here? So really kind of quite crucial metrics about, understanding, are we doing a good job or not? And in the shareholder value bit, it's usually a derivative of profit or cash flow or something like that a lot of companies will look at. And that sounds pretty basic, but essentially what you tend to find when you kind of really get into how businesses make decisions is those metrics are not necessarily used to drive the decisions themselves. And that is a massive opportunity for all companies, retailers, and Asda. It's something we've been looking at in the last couple of years. If you understand what, at a corporate level you're trying to do, what you need to absolutely make sure is your decision-making technology and processes are putting those metrics at the heart of how you decide what to do. And I'll kind of come on to that in a minute. So really, once you've kind of done that as a data team, it's really important to understand how the business works. So those 10 to 12 big decision-making processes, which I'll kind of flash up in a moment, it's really important that data teams ingratiate themselves into the business, ask the right questions, understand how the business works, and connects the dots so they can kind of see where these really big opportunities are. And I guess once you've done that, and again, I'll kind of use promotions as an example, it's really about spending your time with the SMEs who run those processes, who make those decisions, to upskill yourself in learning how they work, why they work that way, to really try and figure out where the opportunity is. So again, promotions might be an example of this, but if you look at the process that the business goes through Asda to determine what products we put on promotion throughout the year, first of all, aligning the measures of success. Does that actual process and technology, is it using the key measures of success that I just described at the beginning to drive the outcome? So an example of that might be if you find that the process that you've got that runs your promotion is predominantly driven by cash sales is the main number. Again, it doesn't anchor back to what your measures of success are. And what you might find is that a retailer is deciding that we should put loads of big screen TVs on promotion because they've got a high cash price point. But essentially, customers aren't really that bothered about it. And, the TV industry doesn't really drive much profitability. So, it's quite basic stuff, really, making sure those two things are connected. And clearly the bit that kind of probably subscribes to a lot of people in the room is what technology benefits can you bring to that process? So to what extent is the predictive forecast of, if I put something on promotion, what do I think the volumes that we're going to sell? If I put it in space at the front of the foyer, have we got sophisticated demand technology that's going to say, I think we will sell this amount more products? Or if I put it on price promotion, again, what do we think the elasticity curve is going to be with that? And are we actually using the right optimization technology to plug it into a system and effectively come back with the right outcome? So they're kind of two real ways that you can run through those sort of 10 to 20 big processes. And again, something that we really focus on in Asda. And I think the final bit that I'd say on that is that, again, anchoring back to that bit to really understanding your business. It's no good building really theoretical tools that can't be applied in real life. So the promotion example, I can build some big scientific formula, but if I don't understand, let's call it some hard rules that any retailer would apply. So high fat, salt and sugar products at the moment, there's a lot of legislation from the government about what you can put on promotion, where you can put it on the store, rightly so. I need to understand that so that I don't force lots of HFSS products into the store. If I build something that's sophisticated but doesn't cater for those types of things, it's not usable and effectively isn't really going to help things move forward. And there may also be some soft things that need to be taken into account that are decided at a proposition level, where we basically say things like, we always want to have a certain category on promotion throughout the year because it's really important to our customers, and that may be decided at a proposition level. So areas like baby and beers, wines and spirits historically have been quite important to Asda. If we've got a proposition that says that those things should always be on promotion, you need to know that so you can build it into those business rules. So they're the real three main things. Does it anchor back to what the business is actually trying to achieve? How mature is the technology and capability that we're using within that decision-making process? And as you are designing and building things, really upskilling yourself in what are the key business rules and the practicalities that you have to consider. And effectively, that's really when I find that the analytical side of the equation becomes a lot more powerful, because I think I've built and designed a really sophisticated, thoughtful decisioning tool. Now I can analyze where I can make it better in the future. Analysis first might not tell you that you've got a problem with your decisioning tool. So it's just a way that we're sort of starting to really think about how you prioritize your time and what we work on. So just a bit of a practical example, just to sort of bring that to life. This isn't kind of anything like too official, but it kind of helps us really, think about those 10 to 20 decisioning tools. So what I kind of talked about, the plan on the left-hand side, understanding what your corporate strategy is. And underneath that, there's usually 3 or 4 dynamics that are really, really important to really get a good stranglehold on as a data team. So things like customer missions, like what types of customers do we think want to shop in Asda? We really need to understand that so that, when we are building these tools, we're making sure we're subscribing to the right people when we're looking at the demographics, perhaps, of a store that we're going to open. The category roles. So again, strategically, a lot of retailers will know that not all categories are made even. You've got some categories which, on the face of it, they don't really make any money. They're very, very, very low margin. They're quite hard to push through the distribution network, but they're pretty much seen as footfall drivers. Then you've got other categories which might not be a footfall driver, but actually, if customers buy into it, they're very high profit products as well. So really understanding the dynamics of your different categories is very, very important, and how that's kind of set at a strategic level. Pretty much all companies have like an investment plan. We're going to spend X amount on marketing, X amount on capital spend. Again, it's really important to know those types of things, because I don't want to build a decisioning tool that tells me I need to spend 10 billion quid on opening new stores when we don't have it. So those types of things are important. And then finally, I've already referenced it, customer and profit targets, and those metrics that the business is using to really define the success are very important. And then really this is the kind of 10 to 50, the sort of 10 to 20 different areas of any retailer really, which will sort of drive the key financial outcomes. So kind of just referencing on here, you've got the stuff in blue, which is traditionally what a commercial team would do, the decisioning tools that they would work with. Range, so what is our master range list? What are those 100,000 products that we want to list throughout the year? Promotional space of those 100,000 products, which are the ones we really want to put on our gondola ends or in our foyers, because we think our customers are going to be really buying into it. And then pricing, big pricing tools, every day, every product, every store, what is the right price of that product for our customers and for our shareholders? And then essentially making sure that we're getting value in our relationship from our different suppliers. So, there are 4 really big decision-making processes and tools that are happening in the commercial team every day throughout the year, and they will drive pretty much all of your sales and a significant amount of your cost outcomes in the business once they're determined. And then concurrently to that, like I call it kind of the space side of the equation, there'll be a team of people, usually in a property type function, that will be looking at, should we open new stores? Where should we open them? Why? What are the types of demographics of potential customers we'll have around those stores? And then underneath that, how do you translate those stores once you've opened them into the amount of space that you should be giving to each category? And then kind of magic happens in that kind of micro space bucket, which happens in a merchandising function, which is where your master range list is effectively carved up, and each of those products is put into all of the 600 stores that Asda have got. And, there's a lot of sophisticated decisions that need to happen in that place. So you've kind of got 8 really core decision-making processes, and then essentially that will get handed further down the distribution network into a traditionally a supply team that will then decide, I know my products, I know what stores they're going in, I know how much space they've got, how many shall I reorder? Like, what is the expected demand? How many should we order from our suppliers? And so on and so forth, going into the distribution network, where we have to figure out how we effectively get those products from the suppliers to the store. And we're thinking about things like workforce management tools. We're thinking of things like fleet management optimization as well, both in our depots and in our stores. And essentially, you kind of come to a place where you've kind of got, in here, 15 really key decision-making processes that happen in various different functions in the organisation. And the trick for data teams like ours is to really work with them and to figure out, as I kind of went back on that kind of previous slide, those 3 main things. Are they using the right metrics that drive the corporate strategy? How optimized are they, and what sort of technology thinking can we bring to the table? And thirdly, making sure that we are absolutely involved and understand how the business works. So as we design and build things with our colleagues in those different functions, they are practical, they work, and they consider all the right different things. And again, that's where your kind of reporting, analysis, and insight can then come off the back of it and really help you with your sort of continuous improvement flow. So a couple of interesting ones we're working on, kind of anchoring back to that space piece that I talked about. 2 of the things that we're working on in our team at the moment is new store formats. So you've probably seen that Asda has started to look at the convenience market. About 10% of grocery spend across the UK happens in convenience stores. Previously, Asda didn't have a proposition in that space. So it's something that strategically we've decided to do, because we think that we've got a lot of potential Asda customers that we're missing out on, the opening stores in the right place can subscribe to. So, the way that we look at this is, how do we build and evolve a tool that we've got, led by Tom over there, that is effectively making sure that we are opening stores in optimal locations. And then when we open them, how do we make sure that we allocate the right space to our different categories within that? So measures of success, I've already talked about it. Like, what are our customer missions and what are the demographics around those stores? So are we actually going to open a store in a place where, it actually fits our customer proposition? And then secondly, looking at the kind of financial viability of that is the other important side of the equation as well. The things that we'll always have to think about, those kind of business rules and really thinking about the strategy, is from a proposition perspective. I've already kind of talked about the customer. Let's make sure that we open something in a place where we've got customers that are going to shop in Asda. We'll also need to think about practicalities around, you can't just open a new store and not think about your distribution network. So, is the tool and is our thinking considering the capacity that we've got in our regional depots around perhaps where we want to open stores, and things like financial appraisal models. Like I said, there's a certain amount of capital spend that most businesses want to invest. And when we are building this, we want to make sure that we've got the right return on investment that's meeting those different hurdle rates as well. So there's lots and lots of different data. There's lots of analysis that we can do. The building tools that are practical and anchor back to our strategy and those measures of success is absolutely vital. And then just the second one as well is in our existing store estate, 600 stores that we've got. We are constantly looking at when and how they should be refreshed. Putting in new self-scan checkouts, putting in new technology, putting in new security. That also gives us an opportunity to lift all the space up that's in the stores for all those different categories and basically start again and put it back down. So it's an opportunity for us to rebalance the category space that we've got between general merchandise, clothing, fresh produce, and all those different things. So again, we're helping design and build and evolve a model that will put the customer and the sort of shareholder metrics at the heart of that to make sure we're making the right decisions. But again, we spend quite a bit of time making sure that processes and business rules are really built in. So again, I don't want a store that's full of TVs. So it doesn't matter what my model says. I want, there's going to be certain rules that you'll have within an organisation that are thinking about, I want a minimum level of toy bays, for example, or a minimum level of space allocated to produce because it's important to Asda's proposition. Okay. So we're building all of that in. Yeah. And then, so I think I'll probably overran a little bit. But I think the key focus for us is there's loads of data, there's loads of technologies, loads of capability. But what we're really passionate about in Asda is knowing our business and working with our stakeholders, building those relationships. And when we build those products, really being bought into making sure that we can own them and enhance them over time. So that's it. That's the summary. I think I'm a few minutes over. So I think I'll pass on questions for now, and maybe I'll, if anyone's got any questions at the end, come speak to me.
Nice to see you all. Thank you all for coming, and thank you to Asda for hosting us as well. Nice to meet you all. I'm Adam Barrowcliff, Chief Data Officer at HyperFinity. So at HyperFinity, we're obsessed with helping retailers make better decisions and doing that through decision intelligence. So today we're going to talk to you about decision intelligence and the keys to success. Along with Jessie.
Hi everyone, I'm Jessie. I also work for HyperFinity, but particularly within our Asda contracts, so with all the people sitting over. And I'm going to build on some of the stuff that Adam's saying and hopefully give you some interesting applications within retail. So where we wanted to start was, oh good, everyone actually got it. Where we wanted to start was to think about some of the decisions that retailers have to make every day. And there's loads, and they're really important because they often go on to impact customer experience and business performance. And they're not only important, there's a massive range of them too. So we've got some examples of them here. I'm pointing it and you can't see that, so it's up there. But examples of them are things like, my competitors changed my price, do I now need to change my price? Or I want to start personalising, but where's the best place to do that and how can I optimise it? So because there's so many decisions to make and they're really important, you'd think that there's a really rigorous process behind making these decisions. But unfortunately, for a lot of retailers and businesses in general, most people are like Sad Drake. So they make decisions based on gut feel and they're really siloed. So across all of the different departments across the business, decisions are made in different ways. But ideally, we'd much rather be like Happy Drake. So our decisions are all mapped out, they're data driven, there's a rigorous process behind them, and we embed them into loads of really cool decision-making tools so that all across the organisation, the decisions can be connected and made in the same way. So it's good to stop and think about within a retailer, if you work in one or you just know of one, like how decisions might be made there. And hopefully over the next 20 minutes, we'll give you some ideas of how to be more like Happy Drake.
Yeah, so how do we take you on that journey of becoming more Happy Drake? So we think it can be boiled down to quite a simple framework, really, around how you make decisions today and really understanding that, and then how you work on the capability that'll take you to the next level. And Andy's done a fantastic job. I'm really happy that we're following on from your talk here, Andy. You essentially framed this left-hand piece of the slide around how we make decisions today, how we understand that perfectly. We'll go into that in less detail now. And then, we'll major on, so knowing the lay of the land and the situation, how do you go on to make incremental gains in the capability that you've got to make decisions as an organisation? And I think in terms of how you go about doing that, so creating intelligence, taking action, and measuring success. I think to your point earlier, Simon, around how you actually start to iterate on that as well. And you won't know the answer first time out. How do you take that through this loop and continue to iterate for success? So it starts with that, assessing your decision-making capability today. So it's understanding your big business challenges, as Andy said, understanding the people that make those decisions, what are the key initiatives and what are those key processes. So those 15 things that are in Asda, they're the key processes. How do you really understand them? So you know if you're going to go about making some incremental benefit to that to create additional capacity for making decisions, that it's actually going to land in the right place and it's going to be realised. So I think within that, you can look at those processes and say, well, how are they data driven today? What data sources do they use and consume? Are those stakeholders using that data? What tools are they using to make that? how many of their strategic questions are fully answered. They're really confident to go ahead and make those decisions. But what questions are unanswered, and what questions, what gaps might we have to create some incremental capability? Well, that takes us on to creating intelligence, and Jessie's going to take us into a bit about that.
Cool. So I was going to give you a bit of an intro just into what creating intelligence means. But to start, I think it's good to think about what type of raw data you actually might have at a retailer. So in short, there's going to be loads in there, but you'll have like a visit table to just show you how many visits have happened in a particular day and how much the visit cost and maybe what time it happened at. And then you also might be able to go to a more granular level, so to say within that visit, what was bought, how expensive was each of the products, how much margin we make on each of them. And whilst there's quite a lot of meaning to be had in this data, when you're just using them on their own tables like that, they're only really used for like basic sales forecasting or some really preliminary level of analysis. So what we mean by creating intelligence is like creating data assets that add meaning to that. And then once you've got the meaning and you can get the insight out of it, you can then drive quite a lot of action off the back of it. And generally at HyperFinity, when we're working with retailers, we focus on two areas of creating intelligence. So first of all, we think it's really important that you understand your products. So what is your product offering in your retailer, in your business? And also what role is that product driving for you? Like what is it providing? And then also, as well as knowing your product, you need to know your customers. So who are your customers? And then how do they behave when they are shopping? And these are really two great ways to focus on it because they work together quite harmoniously. So if you're really understanding the types of products your customers buy, it actually informs you quite well about who your customers are. And equally, if you're looking at it from the customer view, looking at the combinations of products they might buy, like within the same visit or in separate visits, it can actually teach you quite a lot about the similarities and the differences between the products.
Press the right button. If you take all that great intelligence that you have around your products and your customers and you put that at the heart of your decision making, we feel like it can impact an entire retail organisation. So you can reap the rewards of that better decision making capability across the full spectrum. So just to highlight a few examples. So within marketing and media, if you understand your product range really well and the attributes and the why that somebody buys that product, you can create really great audiences. You can serve that out through targeted media on your website. If you understand how your products are bought at different prices, you can understand the elasticity of those. You can understand how the demand transfers when certain things are on promotion, when certain things are taken in and out of those global ranges, and how those local ranges work. You can understand where that demand's going to shift to for your commercial outcomes. If you know both of those things, you can start to forecast demand intelligently. You know how decisions that you make as a marketing function or as a pricing function are going to impact on demand, instead of a supply chain function just trying to create their demand forecast in isolation. They need to be aware of those decisions. And then, how we create really customer-centric hierarchies to really understand the product ranges, as Andy was talking about as well. So Jessie's going to go into some examples around how product and customer intelligence has fueled decision-making in Asda.
Yeah, and hopefully this will lead on quite nicely to Raf's talk, but we're going to be a lot more high level than I'm sure Raf will be. So one example of a way you can create intelligence is about layering your capability. So if we start with the example of creating product attributes, like Adam mentioned, so I suppose what are product attributes? We think of them as like a much richer language that you can use to describe your products. So typically, when I was talking about the raw data, within a retailer, you have your product hierarchy that will tell you by product, like what category was it in, what department was it in, maybe even what aisle was it in. But that's usually kind of where it stops. So if you create some product attributes, then you're learning a lot more about what your products are doing for your business. And some examples of these are things like what types of customers will buy this product. So I think we've got on here, like a scratch cook might buy that, or within other similar products, where is the price point for that particular product? Like, is it a high price product or a low price product? And then once you've created attributes like this, it tells you a lot more about what your products are providing for you. And once you understand your product, you can then move that on to try and understand your customers better, to create really detailed customer segments. and what we mean by a customer segment. So it's a way of understanding the individual customer as a part of the whole customer base. So you take all of your customers and then group them up into different chunks. And you can do this by like how loyal are your customers, ranging from high to low loyalty, or what particular life stage are they at. So if you've got a lot of retirees versus a lot of young families. And that means that, like I said, you can then understand your whole base. And then once you've understood the whole base, you can move on and layer it again to select some intelligent audiences out of that base, which would be a group of customers that have all got similar characteristics. So, for example, they might be customers that are likely to respond well to a particular brand. So they might be really interested in like Bird's Eye fish fingers or something. And then once you've got all of these intelligent audiences, you can start thinking about personalising them. And personalisation is quite broad, but in this context, I mean it more in terms of how are you indicating a good action that could be taken based on the audience that you've selected. And then once you've got all of this layered on top of each other, you can then start thinking about actually taking that action.
Right. So to kind of box off this idea around creating intelligence, what are the keys to success within that? So here you've already established the decisions that you can make, how they're mapped to those big objectives. And really you're looking to advance the capability. So you're going to be leveraging machine learning, data science techniques to find those hidden pockets of meaning, those hidden relationships, look to quantify signals and drivers, and then where you can create a business language around that, because you then need to take those products and those pieces of intelligence and embed them within the business. They've got to be simple. So once you get out there and they need to embed into the processes that Andy was showing, we've got to make sure that they're actionable so that we actually get these things used. Another thing that makes things hugely actionable is making it to production. So doing one-off pieces of insight that you throw everything at, they can look fantastic, they can be extremely informative in the moment. But from our experience, it's better to land smaller bits of insight that make it to production and help you reap the rewards of that week in, week out. For me, it's that regular insight always kind of trumps those one-off flash in the pan pieces. And with things that do make it to production, you can then start to layer capability. So if you understand your product attributes really well, you can understand your segments really well, your audiences really well, etc. So it's about layering those pieces of capability on top of each other to take your decision-making capacity to a new height. So with our decision-making capability expanded, we understand a lot more about our products and customers. We now get into, right, how do we land that? How do we empower our stakeholders to take better action? So I think an underrated part of doing this is it's all about confidence. So people are making these decisions within those processes. How do you inspire that person to have the level of confidence in the piece of analysis, the data assets that you've created? How do you go about doing that? And here's some ideas around that. So you've got to build that trust with easy to use tools. So you've got to be able to see it and touch this data and interact with it in a visual way if possible. It's got to embed that intelligent asset that you've created into that tool. So that might be a new segmentation that kind of clears up business language around how loyal the customer base is, or certain types of customers in a broad sense, and how they interact within the business. And that might be embedded into your BI tools and help you really bring that to life, help you make decisions against that customer base. Even better if you can go further than that and start to build in predictive capability within these tools, the ability to simulate different outcomes. So that if you're trying to come up with a decision, you can try a low, medium, high, and you can do some sensitivity analysis around that, and how you can embed forecasts into that to really help that stakeholder feel confident in the parameters that they're inputting and that they're making a smart decision. Not all decisions are of that nature. Some are, much more automated. Things like around personalization, where you might have a next best action algorithm that's suggesting the right thing to do for every customer. You can't sign off each individual decision, but as data professionals here, we've still got a job to do in terms of how do we build that trust for our stakeholders that intelligent asset is doing what we want. So it's in that automated decision scenario, we've really got to try and break open that black box, let people see that it's making the right decisions and build that trust. And finally, let's make it easy for those stakeholders. If they've made decisions in the tools that we're providing as data professionals, let's connect it to how they can actually activate it. So this might be selecting the right intelligent audience for a media campaign. Let's make it easy for them and allow them to send that list to their actual activation platform and make sure that these actions and decisions are actually acted upon.
Cool. So we've got some examples here of the data asset you could have created and then the action that you could drive off the back of that within Asda, but I think it applies to loads of retailers really, it's not Asda specific. And I'll pick up a couple of them to talk through in more detail. So the first one I'm going to talk about is price elasticity. So you could build an algorithm that for each of your products, it tells you the price elasticity of demand for that product, which then means that you can identify the impact of if you change the price of the product, what would the demand change be? And then the action you could drive off the back of that is it helps you know where you should invest in price. So should you make bread cheaper because the demand's then going to skyrocket? And then you can forecast the impact of that. Another one, so I'll skip to the third one. So you could build a classification model to identify churn risk, so that for every customer you see the likelihood of them lapsing from your retailer. And then as a result of that, you'd have the churn risk for all of the customers, and you could identify the group that you think are really likely to lapse. And then that might help you direct your retention program. So you might then decide to give an offer that says, if you come back and shop next week, we'll give you £5 off.
Right, we're nearly there. Stick with us. So the final piece of the puzzle is really to measure success. So here's some guidelines around how you might do that. So from a strategic point of view, one thing that we often see is missed, and I'm sure so many people in this room have felt the pain of this, which is propositions and decisions are made. We head down that direction, and at some point, one of your stakeholders will come back to you and go, it'd be great if we could measure this thing that's already in flight, that's already happened. And, as a data professional, you always think, I would love to have been engaged in this stuff. So it comes back to knowing your stakeholders and knowing your processes. You need to get yourself there at that first point and say, measurement is critical. I know that this is going to be asked to be measured. And I actually need to inform how the proposition works so that I can measure it for you. So you need to plan the measurement. You need to be clear about what you are measuring. So whether you're measuring the holistic impact of a program or proposition, Jessie's going to expand on this idea, and really what metrics you're trying to drive. So Andy mentioned the kind of key KPIs that those programs and decision-making tools should influence. You should also know what good looks like. So you should be able to say, this is a good outcome, this is a bad outcome. And from those, you should also be able to say, and when I see a good outcome, I will do more of X. When I see a bad outcome, I will pivot and change strategy to Y. You should be able to set your stall out and say those things before anything actually goes live. And it's a really healthy practice to do that. But then when it comes to the actual measurement part of it, this is where the science element comes in, and a lot of people in this room will love this part. Creating a fair test is actually really hard. It's the kind of cornerstone of really great measurement. But how do you create a fair test of maybe you're trying to observe a sales uplift? How do you make sure that the customer group that interacted with that particular product or proposition is well represented, and that we can actually say for sure, yeah, that is a statistical uplift in sales, which was my target KPI. And to do that, you want to really leverage the assets. So you've created a lot of rich intelligence about your products and your customers. How do you start to use those segmentations to actually help you create a fair measurement? And then finally, once you do get a great outcome in your measurement and you really understand whether something's worked or not, build it back into your decision-making tools so that you've got the action that your simulations suggested you should go for and the outcomes that you actually got, and close that loop and iterate forwards for success. And Jessie's going to talk about a bit how we've applied those principles within Asda.
Yeah, so the example we're going to use is particularly Asda Rewards, but I think the questions you have to ask yourself and the decisions you have to make are fairly applied across any type of measurement that you're going to do. So real quickly, I feel like everyone will know what Asda Rewards is, but it's the loyalty app. And so you might either, at the start of thinking about how you're going to measure something for rewards, you want to decide whether you're actually going to measure the whole program, so the change in customers' behaviour as a result of using the app, or whether you're bothered about a more granular aspect of the proposition, so a particular star product that might have gone live, or are you trying to measure the impact of this new mission? So that's the first decision you need to make. And then, so this is all around being clear about what you're measuring. And then after that, like Adam mentioned, you need to be super clear about the KPIs that you're actually bothered about. And I think to do this well, you need to be really integrated with your stakeholders. You need to talk to them a lot, and you need to make sure you're really clear on what the business goals are, because that will massively impact the KPIs that people are actually wanting to measure. So some examples of these are for the whole program. You might be wanting to measure sales uplift or how many new customers it drove into Asda. But for the proposition, you might be bothered about different KPIs. So you might be wanting to know how many more baskets this product featured in, or did a different number of customers start buying it that weren't before. So that's all about being really clear about what you are measuring. But I think the hardest bit for any piece of measurement is making sure it is a fair test, specifically for something like Asda Rewards, because it's an opt-in for the customer. They get to decide whether they're going to take part in it. And that makes it quite different from a lot of other things you might measure. So like an email campaign, because then the retailer is deciding that they're going to serve all of these customers with the email. And that makes it really easy to just take a 5% holdout or something, and then you can do the usual A/B test. But for something that's opt-in, like rewards, you can't just tell a group of your customer base, like, so you can't have the app. I don't think they'd be very pleased with that. So you need to think of another way to take a control group and create one. So a way in which you can do this is to develop an algorithm that might create you a synthetic control. So they're not actually customers that have been held out. They're also customers within your base. They've just decided for whatever reason to not use the app. And what I mean by synthetic control is, I mean, it's a lot more complicated than this, but you basically pick a customer that's taken part in rewards or whatever you're trying to measure, and then you find another customer that hasn't but looks a bit like them, and then you then measure to see what they go on to spend. But obviously one of them's using the app and one of them isn't, so you can assume that the difference is a result of the app. And sounded simple, but there's loads of challenges with it that make it really hard to make sure it's a fair test. So I'll give you a few examples. So things like, what level of the customer are you using? Can you replicate that in the testing control group? A lot of retailers don't even have a very good customer identifier. So like, have you got one that you can use to measure? What sales are you interested in? So are you interested in just the sales going through your loyalty scheme or whatever it is you're trying to measure, or are you bothered about the customer's total sales? And also it's worth thinking about whether your self-selection opt-in problem that you've got, is that causing any unnecessary bias in your test group? So are your customers naturally more loyal just because they've chosen to opt in to using the app? So yeah, these are all things that are really hard to make sure you navigate so that your test is fair. But like Adam said, if you use your assets that you've already built. So for example, another challenge is that it's quite hard to make sure like the customers even look like each other, but you might be able to use your customer segments that you've built in your creating intelligence section to make sure that when you stratify them, the test and control group look really similar. So it's a good way to ensure that you think your test is fair.
Brilliant. So thank you for listening. And yeah, I think if you take anything away from this 20 minutes, it's this framework around assess how you're making decisions today, get really close to your stakeholders, understand those big initiatives in your business, the processes, as Andy was talking about, know how your data fuels those or not, and then look for those incremental opportunities to create more intelligence, drive that action, and remember, do try and measure it from the start.
Thank you, first of all, for sticking around post-pizza. And thank you, obviously, HyperFinity and Asda for inviting me to come and speak to you about how the Leeds Institute for Data Analytics at the University of Leeds can support retailers. So just as a bit of background, I actually come at the data science field not as a data scientist by background, but as a public health nutritionist. So you'll see that there's a lot of bias in the examples that I give, that are all in the public health nutrition kind of space, but that's not the only thing that we do at Leader. And there's lots of other things going on as well in terms of sustainability, waste reduction, all sorts of things that I won't touch on. But hopefully it gives you a bit of a flavour for the kinds of things that can happen when academia and industry come together. So there's a bit of a background of the university, Leader and the CDRC. So the university has obviously been operating for over 100 years and has had the kind of overarching aim of knowledge generation and likes to use that knowledge in ways that can help the world, ideally. The way in which that can be done as technology's evolved has really sort of changed and moved forward. And that really led to the need for an organisation such as LEADER, or the Leeds Institute for Data Analytics, which is kind of a physical space that brings together a group of over 300 academics, all with interests and skills in data science across the university as a whole. And it also provides physical and cloud-based infrastructure for hosting data and analytics services as well. In total, it supports over £75 million worth of research across the university. So there's a lot going on within LEADER. Part of that sits the Consumer Data Research Centre, or the CDRC. And both the CDRC and LEADER have been in operation since 2014. The CDRC now works with over 30 different data providers across 60 different research themes, and I'll touch on 2 of those in the examples that I give around retail and around health and wellbeing. So just to sort of explain what I mean by consumer data. So obviously this includes retail data, but really it's data that is produced every day in our day-to-day interactions with the environments around us. So when we shop, when we use public transport, our cars, there's loads of data being generated all the time. Retail is just a small part of that. And really the mission within the CDRC and what we do at the university is how can we take this data that wasn't designed for research purposes and actually repurpose it and repackage it so that we can answer really important big societal questions. So it's all about data for public good. So we've heard a lot about why retailers and businesses are using the data and the kind of insights they can get from their own data, but why would academics be potentially interested in getting hold of that? I'm going to demonstrate the power of big data through an example of obesity. So as I'm sure you're all aware, obesity has been rising for the past sort of 70 or so years, and despite various efforts, nothing has managed to reverse that trend yet. So it's really difficult to try and unpick what's going on with obesity. It's not just eat less, move more. When the government's foresight report came out mapping all the different factors that contribute to obesity, they found over 50 different nodes or things that actually could contribute to obesity, sitting within 7 different domains. And so when you look at the data and the knowledge you've got across all of those domains, most of the traditional research methods, actually asking people to fill out surveys, taking blood samples, body measurements, those kinds of things, only sort of scratch the surface of all of these pieces of information that we need to really understand what's going on with big problems such as obesity. So when you think about consumer data, big data, and map it onto all these domains, there's actually a huge potential to unlock more about what's going on with these huge societal problems. Potentially about 80% of coverage of those nodes can be achieved through big data, some of which can be consumer data, such as that gathered by retailers around market prices, the purchasing habits of the population, what kinds of foods, for example, are available, and the variety that is being offered to customers. So that's where the academic and research interest comes in these kinds of data sources. So how do we get hold of it, knowing that there's so much commercial sensitivity around these types of data, and why would retailers want to share it with us in the first place? So we are really proud of the way we have developed a framework for partnership working at the Leeds Institute for Data Analytics and the CDRC, where we partner really closely with our data providers. So it's not simply give us your data, please and thank you. We will now do what we like with it. We like to keep data providers informed, take them along on the journey, and really generate insights that are beneficial for everybody. So we do this using our expertise and also the secure data infrastructure that we've got at Leader called Laser, which is an Azure-based platform. And we can de-identify, aggregate, and process the data in a way in which, even in some cases, we can actually, with permission, make that data open for people to use, download from the CDRC data service, for example. And by doing all of these things, we can create strategic insight that we can feed back into businesses. Also academic outputs, which really sort of provide the rigor and the independence of the knowledge that's coming out of those pieces of data, and ultimately a wider understanding of those big societal issues that we're trying to tackle. And the fourth and sort of final big benefit of this is capacity building, which I'll touch on the next slide, and how we can kind of create data science skills that feed back into the local workforce, basically. So one really good example of how Leader supports capacity building and data science skills is through our data science development programme, which over the since 2016 has supported 73 data scientists who come and work with us. In their early careers, they work with us for a year on 2 different 6-month projects to gain experience working with real-world data, real-world problems, and organisations. It's been a really successful programme, and 75%, there's an error on the slide, it should say 75% of our data scientists have gone into public or private sector roles. The remaining 25% have gone on to do PhDs, so a really good success rate of getting those data science skills back into industry. The retail sector in particular has benefited really well from that. So just one retailer, 10% of their data science workforce is actually made up by our DSDP alumni, so having a really good impact with data science skills in the retail sector. So the next sort of few slides are going to give you some examples of the work that we've been doing in these 2 CDRC domains, health and wellbeing and retail. But before I dive into those, I just thought it was worth giving credit to the team that have been working on this, and there's a few more names as well that I forgot to include, so sorry, there's quite a lot of people that have been involved in this work, and it's the Nutrition and Lifestyle Analytics team, which is led by Dr. Michelle Morris. So really, the work that we do in this kind of focused domain around nutrition and lifestyle analytics allows us to work with retailers to gain insight that helps us tackle societal problems within health, nutrition, and lifestyle in a more general sense. So one of the key portfolios of the work that we do is a collaboration with the IGD, the Institute of Grocery Distribution, and on their Healthy and Sustainable Diets programme. And together with engaged members of over 20 retailers and manufacturers, we're working to understand how we can shift the retail environment so that it's enabling people to purchase and consume healthier and more sustainable diets. So we've heard a lot about how these data are really important for creating sales and raising revenue, but also there's the corporate social responsibility piece around, are we doing what's right for the customers, and what can we learn that actually gives a different lens on the way we look at the data to help customers with these kinds of challenges. So notably, the sort of start point is that only 1% of the UK population currently meets the population's Eat Well Guide dietary recommendations, and those are the recommendations that say the proportions of each food group which should make up our diets. So there's a long way to go, but changing behaviours is really hard. So how can we actually shift those environments to make it easier for people? So the way in which we're doing this is by working with the retailers to co-design trials which we can test in real-world scenarios and use transaction records to understand what's gone on when we've made those changes. And we do that on 5 behavioural levers, which the IGD have identified as potentially beneficial ways in which we can shift and nudge behaviours in stores. So through signposting and the messages that we place around products, for example, the placement, whereabouts in store those products sit, and the kind of prominence we give to them. Products themselves, so things like reformulation and the ranging that's on offer. Influence, so that's kind of the social norms that sit around foods. So how can you use social norm messages, perhaps celebrity influence, to shift behaviours, and also incentivization. So can we use price promotions, for example, to really drive beneficial health promoting behaviours? So the next few slides are examples of the trials work we've done in this area. I don't know how I'm doing for time, but I can whiz through. The first one being from Sainsbury's, where they implemented a 60p fruit and veg price promotion. So we know that price is often a barrier for people purchasing and consuming fruits and vegetables, and only a third of adults are currently achieving their 5-a-day recommendations. So Sainsbury's identified a group of fruit and vegetable products and reduced the price of these to 60p throughout January over 2 consecutive years. So it was run for 4 weeks in each of those years. We used the transaction data and identified using all of these analyses are based on interrupted time series modelling. So we take the pre-trial sales data and forecast what's likely to have happened had the trial not gone ahead, and then we overlay the real transaction data during and after the trial and see how that compares with the predictions that we came up with to get an estimation of the trial effects. So we saw here with this particular trial that the sales of fruit and vegetables really did increase quite significantly during the trial, up by 78%. And that also created a shift in the customer baskets towards the Eat Well guide, which was really positive. We also saw that the trial was actually most effective for fruits, in particular tropical fruit, which was perhaps not surprising, seeing as they usually sit at a much higher price point, so that reduction in price was much more significant for those products. That does, however, raise questions around whether that was the right thing to do from a sustainability perspective, given that those fruits are coming from further afield. Interestingly, the effects of the trial were not sustained all the way through the trial, so they did actually drop off after 3 weeks, by the trial being a 4-week duration. So that gives us a bit of insight into what's happening with customers. So perhaps they're becoming fatigued by seeing these promotions in store after week 3, which is interesting hypothesis. So the next one is another Sainsbury's trial, and again they used price incentivization. So if you're not aware, the government in the UK offers Healthy Start vouchers for families on low incomes with young children. So families in those situations can receive £4.50 per week in terms of vouchers that they can spend on fruits and vegetables, pulses, milks and infant formulas. So what Sainsbury's did was an additional commitment to that government Healthy Start voucher scheme, whereby if a customer used their Healthy Start voucher in store, they were printed out an additional £2 top-up voucher from Sainsbury's that they could then spend on fruits and vegetables in store. So we looked at what happened with the baskets when those vouchers were used by the customers. We saw that when the top-up vouchers were used, baskets did shift towards the Eat Well guide. It had the intended effect of people purchasing more fruits and vegetables. They weren't simply using that additional money to offset against other products. So that's really good that we can actually see, so for the first time really, how people are actually using these types of vouchers. However, the actual uptake of the vouchers was pretty low. So even though they seemed to work really well when they were being used, only 17% of vouchers were actually redeemed. And of all the customers that were eligible to use a voucher, only 50% used a top-up voucher only once. So there were a lot of vouchers going unused, which gives an opportunity for, okay, how can we encourage people to make the most of the schemes that they're eligible for, which is a wider government question as well. So that's another one. Next one being a trial that took place with Asda. So this one was all around product placement and merchandising of plant-based products. So the theory behind what went on in this trial came from the out-of-home sector. So you might have realised there's been a shift away from when you go to a restaurant, you maybe had to ask for a vegetarian or vegan menu before and it came as a separate menu. Actually, there's been a lot more integration of those products now, so that all of those plant-based options are on the single menu that you're offered, and that's shown to be really, really beneficial in encouraging people to try those plant-based options that they might not have seen before if they weren't requesting those menus. So, using that kind of theory, Asda decided to trial shifting those plant-based options within the meat aisle. So previously, as you can see on the diagram, they were in the meat aisle, but in a dedicated plant-based bay. So what would happen if we took those plant-based options and put them next to their meat counterparts? So plant-based sausages next to pork sausages, for example. And that's what we examined using the transaction data in this case. We saw that it didn't work, is the short summary. So sales of the products that were moved actually declined by 30%. So had the opposite effect than what we were hoping for. Interestingly, greater decline in more urban and deprived areas as well. So customers, they weren't actually switching into other ranges either. Meat sales didn't go up, and plant-based in the frozen aisle didn't go up either. So people weren't looking for their plant-based elsewhere or substituting with meat. It seemed like they just weren't buying them. Perhaps they were getting them from other retailer instead. So that's an interesting piece of insight for Asda to take on board. We also hypothesised that this could be to do with customers that were shopping for plant-based. They maybe didn't want to go down the meat aisle and really sort of delve and look for those products. They just simply weren't going down there. And perhaps meat eaters that might have considered choosing something plant-based as an alternative, once you actually place them side by side, the price disparity between those products became really obvious, and we think that might have put people off. So even though it was a bit of a flop of a trial, I think something to note here is that the insights were actually really powerful, and as a result of this, Asda committed to increasing their vegan range by 50% this year, and also to improve the price comparison between the meat and plant-based options. So that's a really good example of where insights from trials has changed behaviour and practice within retail settings. I've got a few more. Have I got time?
Yeah,
great. Okay, cool. So this one is an example for M&S. So we know that often a barrier to consuming more vegetables is that you have to prepare them, you need more time, you also need equipment and skills. So using this kind of convenience theory, M&S actually moved some of the pre-prepared salads within the Italian ready meals bay. So if people are shopping for ready meals, they're probably looking for a quick, convenient option. But can we nudge them to also include some vegetables in that by picking up one of these salads that's merchandised with the ready meals? Ultimately, it didn't seem to have any effect. In this particular trial, we had trial stores and control stores, which we tracked over time, and the pattern is pretty much the same in both those store types. While we did see a spike at the beginning of the trial period, as I say, this spike was replicated in both groups. So it doesn't seem to be a true effect of the trial coming in. We actually think it was to do with seasonality and perhaps weather events, as we know that salads are consumed and purchased more when it's warmer outside, everyone's barbecuing, and then as the months get cooler towards the winter, sales drop off, and that's exactly what we saw. Interestingly as well, when we looked at the Eat Well Guide basket segmentation, we actually saw that M&S customers were performing really well already on fruit and vegetable purchases. They were almost hitting that Eat Well Guide recommendation, which we hadn't seen in any of the retailers before. So it leads us to question, was this even the right trial to implement within M&S customers? If they're already achieving those kinds of targets or thereabouts, would something else have been a better test, maybe something on fibre or fish or some other health promoting food group? And sort of encourages us to think about what insights can we actually gather before we design the trials in the first place. The final one that I wanted to share with you is an example with Lidl, where they were looking at encouraging customers to make small but healthy swaps, knowing how difficult it is for people to change their dietary behaviours. Can we just make small nudges that are going to potentially add up over time to lower calories overall in the basket and those kinds of things? So they selected 8 products and 8 product counterparts. So these were healthier alternatives to the original product. They might have been lower in calories, lower in fat, lower in sugar, or in one case higher in fibre. And they also were merchandised with health messaging that encouraged customers to make a switch from their original product to the healthier variant. Findings of this trial were really mixed. So in some products, the messaging seemed to work really well, and in other products, not so much. So it's kind of left us trying to unpick what might be going on from a customer behaviour point of view. So, for example, in cereals and coleslaw, the trial was really effective. Cereals, the messaging was around reduced sugar, and coleslaw it was around reduced calories. But for fries, rice and cheese, both product variants increased. So actually the trial and the messaging kind of acted as cross-promotion. It didn't specifically promote the healthier variant, it promoted both, so they both went up. Interestingly, for the chicken and the tuna products, neither of the product sales changed. They remained pretty stable. So that's led us to a hypothesis around, is there something around price point or something around protein-rich meal centres, which means customers are actually a bit more reluctant to change their behaviours in those kinds of products. These are all kind of working hypotheses that would need additional qualitative insights and additional testing to kind of see whether we're right on any of these, but it's a good starting point to unpick. So just to sort of wrap up, I've shown you all the sort of trials work that we've done to date with the IGD collaboration, which has been going for 3 years now and is still ongoing. So we're hoping to run more trials, which we can share as well. All of these trials you can see summaries of by looking for the IGD driving change reports on their website. So if you did want to delve a bit deeper into what we've done, you can see those. And there will also be some academic papers coming out on those trials as well. Just to sort of highlight, one of the reasons that we've done this is so that we can actually share insights across the industry and across the sector, so to prevent each retailer doing these kinds of trials and repeating and sort of wasting the investment in something that probably isn't going to work. Let's test it out. Let's share the insights so that everyone can see the kinds of things that might be working and what might not be. So it's been a really good example of how, in working in this way with Leader as like a trusted third party, can actually share insights a lot more widely. So next steps, like I say, more trials going on, and we're also working on ways in which we can streamline our trial analysis, make it more efficient, slicker, and also how we can help to make retail data more available for research purposes as well. Potential things of interest, we've already heard about the HFSS legislation, so how can we use transaction data to look at what's been going on as a result of that. Lots going on with Healthy Start voucher and the new digitalisation that the government has implemented. Has that had an impact, for example? And what about the cost of living? So these are all kind of things that we might see ourselves working on in the future. Yeah, thank you very much, everyone.
Okay, thanks for sticking with us. Appreciate it's been a long session, so thank you for giving up your time. Hope you found it useful and found some insight that you can take to back to your organisations. We're going to follow up with an email just to get your thoughts on the content tonight, and also things that you might like to see in the future. We intend to do plenty of the events going forward. Thank you for coming, and we hope to see you again.